theyeshiva.net.
Okay, please open up your Likkutei Torah. It's not Torah today, it's Likkutei Torah. To page 3. Page 3, which is Daf Beis, second column. Okay, so it's mamish in the beginning. On the top it should say Vayikra. Now, don't say, not 3 b'shalach. It happens here that every chumash, the numbers start over again. So you have 3 in different places here. You were looking for 3 on top. It's page 3 on top. It says Vayikra, not b'shalach. In other words, it's not 3 right in the beginning of the book, but around 20 pages later. You're looking on the top. It should say Vayikra. Huh?
Vayikra.
Vayikra Daf Beis. Yeah. Vayikra Daf Beis. Yeah. You're probably wondering why we went from Torah to Likkutei Torah and why the different change of names. So Torah and Likkutei Torah are both one set. Torah are many of the Maimarim, the discourses of the Baal Tanya on Sefer Bereshis and Shmos. So they start with Parshas Bereshis, they go to Noach, Lech Lecha, Vayikra, and they go all the way to Vayakel. And that includes also the Yomim Tovim of that period. That would mean it includes Chanukah, which is in Bereshis, and Purim, Maimarim on Megillas Esther, because that belongs to Bereshis and Shmos. And then all the Maimarim, beginning with Parshas Pekudei and on, start in Likkutei Torah. So it's the last one of Shmos, and then it continues the whole Vayikra, the whole Bamidbar, and the whole Dvarim. And that also includes all the Maimarim of the holidays that are connected to that season. So that would include Pesach, and would include, of course, Shavuos, would include, of course, Rosh Hashanah, would include Yom Kippur, Sukkot, because that's all in Sefer Dvarim, and also happens to include the biggest section, which is on Shir HaShirim, which is also at the end of Likkutei Torah. Why was the name changed? The name was changed because of a story. The Tzemach Tzedek was the grandson of the Baal Tanya. He's the one who printed Torah in the year Tovkuf Tzemach Tzedek Daled, which means 1834, in the printing press of a city called Kapost. A few years later, the Maskilim were large groups of Jews that were very active in Eastern Europe, who tried to alter many systems in the Jewish world. So the Maskilim made a Mesira. They went to the Tsarist government and informed that many of the Jewish printing presses are printing materials that are primitive. They're primitive, and they're really stifling the cultural growth of the Jewish people, because everything depends on the material that kids are reading and people are reading. And they managed to close most printing presses. In Russia, they managed to close most printing presses, and they wouldn't allow many works to be printed, including not Hasidic works. Maskilim were very bothered by those. So therefore, Torah was printed, but then right after that it was closed, and they could not continue to print it. It took more than 10 years, Tafresh Ches, which is basically 1848, they left 2 printing presses open, one in Zhytomyr in Ukraine and one in Vilna, and the Tzemach Tzedek managed to print the second volume years later, Tafresh Ches, 1848, so from 1834 to 1848, and in order not the censors were very vigilant, so he changed the name from Torah to Likkutei Torah. So it was a smoother entry. Huh?
What?
There's one maimer from Beshalach, even though there's Beshalach in Torah that he put in, and then he starts with Pekudei. You have to understand what happened with the Beshalach is also in Torah, but he starts off with this maimer of Beshalach, and then Pekudei, and then he starts with Vayikra. Yeah. Now the reason it can get a little confusing is because every sefer the page numbers start again. That's why you have here Vayikra Daf Beis, even though it's not Daf Beis. But this is Vayikra Daf Beis. This Maimer, since we're now in the period after Purim, so it's already Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, 30 days before Pesach, and soon is also going to be Parshas Vayikra. So this Maimer actually deals with Parshas Vayikra, but also deals with Pesach. Pesach and Sfiras HaOmer and Shavuos. So I chose this Maimer now. And this Maimer, which begins with the words Adam ki Yakriv mikem, was said by the Baal Tanya by Shalosh Shudas on Shabbos Parshas Vayikra, Tovkuf Ayin Beis. Shalashud is the third meal of Shabbos Vayikra, Tovkuf Ayin Beis, which would be 1812. And literally this was his last Parshas Vayikra in this world, because already a few months later, Chavdala Tevis, the next winter, he passed away. So this was the last Maimer ever said on Vayikra, because it was Tovkuf Ayin Beis, and already Tovkuf Ayin Gimel was after his Istalkus, after his passing, which happened in the winter of 1812, the end of 1812, Tovkuf Ayin Gimel, Chavdala Tevis, which was Parshas Shmois, Mitzay Parshas Shmois. So this is literally the last year of the Maimarim of the Balatanya, and it's known as the Maimer Adam Ki Yakriv, because it starts with the words Adam Ki Yakriv. It's a very, very fundamental Maimer, as you will see. And at the end, he goes into the Pesach, because this is the season, it was said in the season of Pesach. So he starts off with the Pasuk, Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem V'Goymer. Yeah, page 3, Dav Beis, column 2. You see column 2. You don't see it? Let me just understand his questions. Let's just read the pasuk, so we'll understand his questions clearly. The pasuk says in the beginning of Parshas Vayikra, says, I'll just read the whole pasuk so you'll understand clearly his questions. This is how Sefer Vayikra begins. Hashem calls to Moshe and he says as follows: Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim. Tell the Jewish people. Now listen to the words. Adam ki yakriv mikem karban l'Hashem. Min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzayin takrivu es karbanchem. Tell the Jewish people, a human being, an Adam, a man, who will be makriv, who will offer from you a karban to Hashem. So from the behema, from cattle, from a behema, from animals, min ha-bakar, from cattle, from sheep, you should offer your karban, takrivu es karbanchem, and then starts the specific halachas and laws of karbanas. He starts off with the karbanoila, and then he goes to other karbanas, and thus begins Parshas Vayikra, which is Sefer HaKarbanas, where he goes into the laws of karbanas. But this is the opening pasuk, the introduction to the entire parsha of sacrifices, of offerings, that begins with the words, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban l'Hashem, min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzayin takrivu es karbanchem. Asks the Balatanya, and he says, Lahavin hecheloi shaloi l'noichach Adam, ki yakriv loshen nister, the siyim takrivu es karbanchem loshen noichach. To understand that there is what's a very apparent grammatical problem in this pasuk. Hechiloi means begins, like we have in the Megillah, v'kibala Yehudim eis asher hechelu. Lahavin, to understand hechiloi, the pasuk begins shaloi l'noichach Adam. It begins not l'noichach Adam, meaning not in second person. It doesn't speak in second person. It speaks in Lashon Nister, means a third person. Lashon Nister means a language of concealment, meaning the language you use when the person is not here. It says, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban l'Hashem. So he starts off, a person ki yakriv, as he will be makriv. He's not talking to the person standing in front of him. He's talking about the theoretical person. A person ki yakriv, when he will be. Not when you will be, when he will be. That's called Lashon Nister. How does he finish the pasuk? Adam ki yakriv mikem karban l'Hashem, min ha-behem, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzayin takrivu. It should have said, min ha-behem, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzayin yakrivu. They shall be makriv. Or yakriv, he shall be makriv. The beginning and the end should fit.
Mikem is already noichach?
Yeah,
Mikem is already
Mikem is already noichach, yeah. But we'll soon see the problem with Mikem. Over there you got a bigger problem. There's going to be 3 problems here. Problem number 1 is the beginning of the pasuk is Lashon Nister. The end of the pasuk is Lashon Noichach, right? Lahavin echeloi shaloi l'noichach Adam. He starts off not in second person, ki yakriv Lashon Nister. V'siyim, he finishes, takrivu es karbanchem Lashon Noichach. You should be makriv your carbon. Not he should be makriv his carbon, or they should be makriv their carbon. Consistency. When you read this, if you were writing if you ever did writing, if you were writing a sentence, you fail. You get a big X on such a sentence. Such a sentence doesn't work. It can't work. People who are sensitive to words, people who are sensitive in language, this creates a mental confusion. For people who are not sensitive to writing, it doesn't make a difference. Lashon Noichach, Lashon Nister, Let's get it over with. But people are sensitive to writing. This is you fail your exam.
Want to work for your father,
Huh?
Want to work for your father.
My father would go crazy. My father would go crazy from this. Lashon Zocha, Lashon Akeva, Lashon Yachid, Lashon Rabim, Lashon Nista, Lashon Loichach.
Agreement.
Yeah. So this pasuk, in this sense, seems very strange. Adam ki Yakriv, and then suddenly I'm talking to you, Takriv. That's number one. V'gam, next. Ki Yakriv Lashon Yachid, v'Takriv is Karbanchem Lashon Rabim. Second problem. Who are you talking to? Are you talking about one person, or are you talking about the collective community? Both work. The mitzvahs apply to individuals, the mitzvahs apply to the tzibur. But you have to decide who you're talking to. In the beginning, he's talking to one person. Adam ki Yakriv. He doesn't say, Bnei Adam ki Yakrivu, right? Or Anoshim ki Yakrivu, or Bnei Yisrael ki Yakrivu. Adam ki Yakriv means when he will be Makriv. So now finish. Adam ki Yakriv mikem. Karbon Lashem, min ha-behema, min ha-baka, min ha-tzoyin, Yakriv es karbonai. Or you want to change, so go Takriv es karboncha, but don't go from Lashon Yachid to Lashon Rabim. Takrivu es karbanchem in the plural. Number two. V'gam, third problem is the havalei lameima milas mikem koidem ki Yakriv. The word mikem is a sore thumb. Does not belong there. Adam ki Yakriv mikem karbon Lashem. No, the word mikem had to be before ki Yakriv. It had to be Adam mikem ki Yakriv. A person from among you when he will be makriv a carbon to Hashem. You don't say a person when he will be makriv from among you. Even in English, you hear how strange it is? Describe the person. A person, and I don't mean a person in Timbuktu. A person from among this group when he will be makriv. Very nice. Adam mikem ki Yakriv. Doesn't say that. When a person will be makriv, now you decided to describe the person. You're already telling me the story, but now you go back to describe the person.
It's a classic misplaced modifier.
Yes,
My
yes.
father shot an elephant in his pajamas, the famous...
What?
My father shot an elephant in his pajamas.
Very good. My father shot an elephant in his pajamas. My father in his pajamas shot an elephant. Did your father ever shoot an elephant in his pajamas?
No, my mother threw me out the window a paper towel.
My mother threw me out the window a paper towel, yes. Very good. Very good. Adam mikem ki Yakriv, not Adam ki Yakriv when a person will be makriv from you. In fact,
Human sacrifice was already...
Exactly. In fact, it indicates, right, Adam ki Yakriv when a person will be makriv from you. No, you're not being makriv from you. You're makriv a behema. Adam mikem ki Yakriv b'da behema nabakim anatzah. Those are the three questions that the Baal HaTanya raises in the pasuk. Each question in itself is, of course, a very powerful question, but together, all these questions together tell you, of course, that the pasuk is intentionally doing all these things which you're not supposed to do in writing in order to teach us another layer of meaning in addition to the literal layer of meaning. And of course, his answer is not going to be in this Maimer al-Pi technical pshat, to be able to fit it into pshat, but based on the premise that every mitzvah also applies, in addition to the concrete and physical interpretation, also applies timelessly in the human psyche and in the human soul. There's a spiritual interpretation to every mitzvah. And based on this, he's going to explain what the pasuk is saying. Achine noida, it's known sheyesh b'chol echad beis nefashos. It's known that in every single person there are two souls. Nefesh halikis v'nefesh habahamas. There's the godly soul, and there is the animal soul. And this exists in every single person. Two souls, two nefashos.
Even Graham have that?
Huh?
Graham have that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we learned once a maimer in Parshas Kiseitze. Kisiyena leish shtei noshem achas ahuva v'achas nua. If a man is married to two wives, one is beloved, one is unbeloved, about the Yerusha that he has to give. There we also discussed this. The Sefer of Tanya, of the Baal HaTanya, is also based on this theme. This is how he opens it up. And this is basically an idea that comes from Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the student of the primary student of the Arizal, has a sefer called Shar HaKedusha, or sometimes it's called Shar HaKedusha. He has a sefer also, Ohr Chaim. And there he says that every single Jew, no matter whom, there's no difference who, as he says there, Echad Tzaddik, Echad Rasha, has two souls. One soul he calls the Nefesh HaBahamas, and one soul he calls the Nefesh HaLikis. When you say Nefesh, this is more than just saying every person has a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. The Gemara says in Brachas, and of course this is in Medrash in many places, and Gemara in all places, Vayikra Hashem Elokim Esadam, every person has a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Tov means a positive Yetzer, a good inclination. A Yetzer Hara means an evil inclination. Here, the distinction is far more broad and far more subtle. Namely, we don't call one good and one evil. We call one godly and one animalistic. Animals are not evil, they're just animals. They're not evil at all. They can be very cute and adorable. Some of you have pets. It says in Kabbalah, Kelev is kuloi leiv. The word for Kelev in Hebrew is kuloi leiv, all heart. Man's best friend, all emotion. Kelev, kuloi leiv. It's brought as Sefer Ma'odiyah, one of the big Kabbalah svarim, by the Meir Papirash. Kelev, kuloi leiv. So an animal is an animal, it's not a human being. So when we say we have two souls, it means we operate on two levels of consciousness. We have a full soul, and a soul represents a full persona. A soul is not an inclination. A soul has inclinations. A soul is really a full human engine, a full human battery. A koima shlema, a full human structure. As we'll see, cognition, cognitive faculties, emotional faculties, functional faculties, an entire self. When you speak about self, what does the self include? Whatever the self includes. The self includes abilities for transcendence, for will, for passion, for cognition, for curiosity, for inquisitiveness, for inquiry, for emotions, instincts, cravings, dispositions, attachments. All types of experiences that make up the human self. What are the experiences that make up the human self? So we don't have one self. We don't have one self. We don't have one battery. We don't have one engine. We don't have one identity. We have two souls. We have two selves. In other words, we operate on two levels of consciousness. One is a divine soul, and one is an animal soul. A Nefesh HaLikis and a Nefesh HaBahamas.
Both the levels of consciousness?
Both are states, both can be levels of consciousness. Sometimes one is relegated to the subconscious layers of identity, but so we won't feel it consciously, but there is a consciousness there. I may just not experience it. So that may happen, yes.
Self-awareness is within.
That depends before the mimer or after the mimer.
Self-awareness is within these or beyond this?
Self-awareness for each one means something else. That's the point. Self-awareness for the godly soul means one thing, and self-awareness for the animal soul means something else. Which is why self-awareness is never made of one model. Self-awareness could change by the hour, for some people by the minute. Who am I? Who am I? That's a great question, right? The question of all questions. What makes me who I am? Who am I? The answer to who I am may change by the hour, may change by the day, may change by the month. Depends on which I you're in touch with.
Who's the you you're in touch with? Is there a higher self?
And you want to know who is the one who decides that, right? That's a good question. You want to know who is the one who decides who I am? That's a very good question.
Once you realize who you are, you already know that that's not it. It's already the next level.
And one doesn't know the other guy.
Back to last one.
Huh?
And one doesn't know the other guy.
Well, as we shall see, a major purpose of life is that the two should get to know each other. The two should get to know each other. They should understand each other's perspectives. So that's the Hakdama. B'chol echad beis nefashos nefesh halikis nefesh habahamas.
So 1 second. Who am I? I'm sorry. Who am I is on the soul. The godly is asking the Bahamians, or each asking themselves.
Each one asks themselves, but there's a different answer. If my godly soul speaks, it has one answer to who I am. If my animal soul speaks, it has a different answer to who I am. And both are very real parts of the human identity. Both, you can't escape either of them. I can't make believe I only have one. I have two states of consciousness, two batteries. There is a duality inherent in the human psyche. There is a dichotomy that is intrinsic to human existence.
Two operating systems.
Two operating systems, yes. Now, you know what happens to a computer?
Mm-hmm.
It's called crashes, right? So that's why we crash.
The work is for one to understand the other, to work together, or one to override the other?
That's a great question. Is the work for the two to understand each other? For the two to work in cooperation? Or for one to override the other? And the answer is each one is part of the work. Depends who, when, where, how, why, and what context. That's what he's asking.
Isn't that what we learned? That the nefesh, because davening gets nefesh abahamis.
Yeah. So he'll discuss. This is all going to be discussed. What?
They help each other.
They could help each other, and they can also kill each other.
Consciousness, and it's also physical.
So that's important to understand. When you speak about the nefesh habahamis, another way of defining it is, as he defines it in other places, nefesh hachiyunis, which we would call the biological soul. The biological soul means the electricity that makes the body function. The body is a work which is a miraculous it's a miraculous machine. It's a machine that's worth knowing. You spend many, many years with this. People figure out how their cars work a little bit and how their computers work, and then the most sophisticated, impressive, mind-boggling machine that ever existed, which is the body, that makes 100 million decisions every millisecond. With your 50 trillion cells in the body working in symmetry, is an incredible, incredible machine. And there is a soul that has this brilliance, keeping it together. The nefesh hachiyunis, the electricity or the spiritual vitality that we call the nefesh, that gives chiyus, energy, direction, I'm talking physical direction, to the biological functionality of the body, that's also the nefesh habahamis, which basically is what we share with every animal. Every animal has the soul. Every living organism is an incredible reality, an incredible phenomenon. The bee has a nefesh, and the mosquito has a nefesh, and of course the horse has a nefesh, and the behemoth has a nefesh. And the behemoth is the generic term for all animals. That's why it's called nefesh habahamis. That's one function. Simply the biological functionality of the body comes from the nefesh habahamis. But in addition to that, the nefesh habahamis here is a human nefesh habahamis. It's a human animal. We call the Homo sapien. Meaning it has unique skill, it has unique ability. It has abilities for reasoning that animals don't have. It has abilities, talents, and skills. It can create architecture, it can create art, it can create music, it can create poetry. That the horse in the barn can't do. It can create very impressive mathematical equations, very impressive equations in physics. It can create political systems, it can create universities and curriculums, which a great lioness cannot do, despite her prowess and other skills that she has. She knows how to take down a gazelle that I can't do, but everyone has their skill. So the nefesh habahamis, and then there's of course the passions and emotions. So the nefesh habahamis is really the soul that in some ways we share with our friends, our cousins. Darwin liked to call our ancestors, but he wouldn't say that, of course, here. But the nefesh habahamis is basically the identity in many ways that we share. We're part of the zoological species. When you know the nefesh habahamis, you could look at a person and say, he evolved from the apes. He evolved from the apes. In fact, sometimes his Zayda was much more impressive than him. His Elta Zayda was much more impressive, much more menschlich, much easier to deal with, certainly less harmful, etc.
More predictable.
More predictable, yeah.
Question.
Less venomous, less hate.
The soul that the Western world speaks about is this nefesh habahamis or nefesh habahamis?
That's a wonderful question.
I think their problem is that they don't see it as a dichotomy. That's why they get so tzibblunged.
Perhaps, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
He asked if the soul that Western culture, philosophy, literature speaks of, is it the nefesh halikis or nefesh habahamis? It often does not distinguish between the two, which basically sometimes elevates the nefesh habahamis a little bit and lowers the nefesh halikis a lot. The distinction is important for peace. Before you make peace between the two, you have to know the differences between the two. No peace is ever created if you don't know the differences between the two. Right?
You said before, there's only peace if you acknowledge there's two people, two
Right.
different parties to make peace with.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine in Shalom Bayis, the way to do it is say, oh, there's no differences between you. You're not going to have peace. It'll look peace for a few hours, till the next explosion. Because you're not true, it's not a true peace. True peace always has to take into consideration what every party is. And then sometimes you have to compromise, negotiate, destroy, kill, not compromise, but you have to appreciate the two sides. So the nefesh habahamis is, number one, the biological electricity that gives our bodies its functionality, and that is, don't underestimate what that is, because that is beyond brilliant. No computer comes close to the brilliance of the human brain, what lay in the human brain, that little jelly that exists in our skull, on one level. On the other level, it's all the functional capacities that it has in terms not only of giving the body life, giving it its battery, its engine, but also its abilities of intellectual abilities and emotional abilities and all that, but still the animal consciousness. Then you have a whole other consciousness, which is called the nefesh halikis, the divine consciousness. And both operate, we have two operating systems, they both exist in the human body. Now he continues.
Where in the body are they located?
In every fiber.
Spot. It's not on your finger. You can live without a finger. It's not on your feet.
Well, generally, it says that the nefesh halikis is primarily connected to the moyach, to the brain, and the nefesh habahamis is primarily connected to the lave, to the heart. Nefesh habasar bidami. The pasuk says you're not allowed to eat blood. Why? Ki nefesh habasar bidami. The soul of flesh is in the blood. What's that nefesh habasar? Nefesh habasar means the nefesh that makes the basar. The nefesh that gives the basar its vitality. That's called nefesh habasar. Or as the pasuk often says, ki hadam hu nefesh. The blood is the soul. And of course, which organ is most responsible for the blood? The heart. So even though we know that the brain is of course the central nervous system that controls the heart, so of course the nefesh habahamis is connected to the brain very deeply. But primarily, the organ that's most connected with the godly soul is the mind, the brain, and the organ connected with the animal soul is the lave. But of course, both extend their reign and their empire into every fiber, into every artery, into every sinew, and they fight over the entire body. The Gemara says in the Dorim, Ir ktana zeh haguf. There's a little city. It's called the body. It's a little city. And it's not such a little city, actually. It's a pretty big city. And the city is built brilliantly. The architecture of the city called the body is incredible. There's only one problem, and that city has two kings. It doesn't have one king, it has two kings. And each king combats and tries to control the entire city. The animal soul seeks to control the entire city, and the divine soul seeks to control the entire city. And this conflict is essential to understand the human condition. And the resolution to the conflict is one of the great contributions of this Maimer, which sets it apart from other paths in dealing with this conflict, as we shall see.
Where are the kidneys in this equation?
The kidneys.
In this equation. It says kidneys give advice.
Kloyos yoyatsos. No.
I don't know which side it's on.
And the spleen gives humor.
Yeah.
For those who connect to the spleen.
And the bladder creates your moods. Okay. So you have to understand the oimek of each organ and each limb. You want to tell us about the kidneys?
The heart can't work properly without the kidney.
Pardon?
The heart cannot work. When the heart doesn't work, the kidneys don't work.
And they also bring up another term, nefesh hasichlis.
Oh.
So where does that fit in?
Nefesh hasichlis is something else. That's the rational soul.
Third soul?
That's actually a third soul, yeah.
You need somebody.
You need somebody in between. The referee.
There's Leibniz here.
Yeah.
Kissinger, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if Dr. Kissinger was always the Nefesh hasichlis, but
Aren't there something like 7 souls?
shuttle diplomacy.
That's a great story.
Shuttle diplomacy, yeah. Okay, zu bislach, yeah? Zu bislach, nicht als in ein Moment. So he goes weiter, asher nefesh alekis sharsha mebchinas Adam. Now, to always identify something well, you have to go back to its source. You have to trace it back to its source. The nefesh alekis sharsha mebchinas Adam. It's rooted in a dimension which we call Adam, the human. It says in Bereshis, Vayikra Elikim es Adam b'tzalmai. Hashem creates the Adam b'tzalmai, in His image. So when we say Adam is created b'tzalmai, this Adam is the nefesh elikis. This is the Adam in the person. It's rooted in a state called Adam. What's b'tzalmai? Uksiv, the pasuk says in Yecheskel Perek Aleph, Val dmus hakisei, dmus kemare Adam. On the dmus hakisei, on the image that Yecheskel saw of the kisei hakavod, the throne of glory, he sees on top of it an image that looks like kemare Adam alav milmayla. That's what the pasuk says, like the image of a person. In other words, Hashem reveals Himself to the prophet Ezekiel, to the prophet Yecheskel, in the image of Mara Adam. What does it mean Hashem looks like Adam? Good question. But Yecheskel experiences the divine kemare Adam. That's what the pasuk says. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that Yecheskel saw a physical image of a person and he said, "Oh, this is God." Yecheskel was a navi, and the same Torah says, "Lo yisim lo yisasel l'chol kol pesel v'chol tmuna," etc. Which is a question: what does it mean? Vayivra Adam b'tzalmai, b'tzelem elikim. The image of what? The image of God. God doesn't have an image. What it means is that Hashem revealed Himself to Yecheskel in a way that we can call this the shoirish of Adam, the source of the Adam, the source of the nefesh elikis in the Adam. The nefesh elikis is called Adam. The source of this is something called Mare Adam. It's a certain image that is seen as the ultimate spiritual source of the Adam down here, and that's the shoirish of the nefesh elikis, and that's why we say we were created. The Adam was created b'tzalmai, in the image of Hashem, who is kivayachol, also dmus Adam, Mara Adam alav malmayla. V'ishtal shalus shalal lemato de b'chinas pnei Adam shebemerkava. And the way this soul evolves down into this world, into our body, is through the vehicle of the face of man in the merkava. Yecheskel Hanavi, in his famous vision that he is referring to here, is known as Ma'aseh Merkava, the work of the chariot. Basically, he sees the image of 4 animals. It's the Haftarah of Shavuos, the first chapter of Yecheskel. When the Gemara says Ein Dosh, the Mishnah Ein Doshim of Ma'aseh Merkava, this is the chapter of Ma'aseh Merkava. So Yecheskel sees the image of 4 animals: Pnei Adam, Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Shor, Pnei Nesher. The face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. And they are basically the servants that stand around the Merkava Elyona, the divine chariot. They are the divine chariot, which carry the chariot upon which there is a throne, upon which there's Mare Adam. That's basically the image. Which means in the Merkava you have 2 elements. You have, first of all, Demus Adam on the Kisei, Mara Adam al HaKisei, the Adam that's on the Kisei, that's called Adam HaElyon. And then you have, as one of the 4 groups of animals, you have the face of man, the face of an eagle, the face of an ox, and the face of a lion. So therefore, you have here 2 Adams. You have the Adam on top of the Kisei HaKavod, and then you have the Pnei Adam as one of the 4 groups. So that's what he says. You have to understand. The shoirish of the Nefesh Elikis is where in the Demus Adam on the Kisei HaKavod. But the way it comes down Lamata is through the Pnei Adam, through one of the 4 groups of Chayas that hold up the Kisei HaKavod. They are the chariot that hold up the Kisei HaKavod. That's the way it comes down Lamata. That's already the next step. That's the way the Nefesh Elikis evolves through that Pnei Adam. Where Nefesh HaBaham is the animal soul, he nilkecha mishmarei ha'yifanim v'sharshim abchinas Pnei Shor. The Nefesh HaBahamis also comes from the Merkava, also comes from the Malachim. But this comes from Pnei Shor, from the face of the bull, from the same face of the ox. That's how it evolves into our world. And therefore one looks like a divine soul, and one looks like an animal soul. One comes from Pnei Adam, but is rooted in the Dmus Adam on the Kisei HaKavod, and one is rooted in the Pnei Shor, and it comes down through the Pnei Shor, and it's taken from Shmorei HaYifanim. Basically,
already Lamata, the
yes.
Shor is already. The
Rambam says that in Milchus the Malachim have 10 names and 10 levels. The lowest is called Oifanim. We say every morning Oifanim. V'chayis hakodesh b'raj gadol misnasim b'umas asrafim. Shmorei Oifanim means the shmorim are the sediments, right? Like what's left over on the bottom of the wine, the haven, the dregs. The Shmorei Oifanim, the sediments, the psoilus of the Malachim. That's the source of the Nefesh HaBahamis. It comes from there, the Shmorei Haifanim. Its Shoirish is the Pnei Shor in the Merkava Halyoina, because as the Gemara says, Shor is Melech bebehemus, the king of the behemoths, of domesticated animals, is the bull, and the Pnei Shor is basically the first spiritual source for all the Nefesh HaBahamis in the world, including the Nefesh HaBahamis in a person. Every animal has a Nefesh HaBahamis, of course, which is rooted in Pnei Shor, which is basically a Malach, and then it comes down into our body as a Nefesh HaBahamis.
What about the eagle and the lion?
The eagle and the lion, the Pnei Nesher is the source for all the birds in the world, because the eagle is the king of the birds, and the lion is the king of the chayas, of the undomesticated animals, so the face of the lion is the spiritual source for the soul of all the chayas in the world. And that's really what creates a different chemistry. A bird is a bird because spiritually it's rooted in a different divine energy, the energy called Pnei Nesher. A lion is a lion, and chayas have certain natures because they're rooted in Pnei Aryeh. And all behemoths have certain common natures because they're rooted in Pnei Shor. And our behemoth is also rooted in Pnei Shor. Although our behemoth also Nefesh HaBahamis.
So what the Shmorei Haifanim is not where it's rooted, that's already to Shtalshalos?
That's already Ishtalshalos, yeah. He's speaking here everything on two levels. The original Shoirish, and then Nilkecha means how it evolves, where it's taken from, how it develops. The Bahamas, yes. It comes from Shmorei Haifanim, but the Shoirish is much higher. It's not Shmorim. Shmorim is already dregs. Right. And this is a higher concept, which is Pnei Shor.
This is the way Yecheskel saw it.
This is what Yecheskel saw.
Through his mazolas, through the way he was thinking at that moment. It's possible that every day it's different, so everybody sees it different.
I'm saying, but this was a yeah. The tachlis you do this on the shama loylam haza who kadei levare nefesh habahamis lias bepchinas eskafi v'sapch. The purpose of the neshama, meaning the nefesh elikis, coming down into this world is to be mevarer, which means to refine. Mevarer from the word borer, to refine the animal soul in two states: the state of eskafi and the state of eshapch. In other words, don't think that the coexistence of these two souls is just a random mutation. It's an error, but rather there's a whole purpose that the neshama came down into this world in order to deal with the nefesh habahamis, to refine it, to elevate it, to sublimate it. And there's two states: iskafia and ishapch. Iskafia means subjugation, from the word koife noisa, and ishapch means transformation. One is basically discipline, to discipline the animal soul, and one is to transform the animal soul. That's a whole different process. So you ask, is the purpose coexistence? Is the purpose subjugation? Is the purpose peace? There's two states in the process of refinement. Generally two. One is iskafia, which is discipline, and one is ishapcha, which is transformation. This happens through the divine soul, which encloses itself in the animal soul. And this hislapshus is critical. Hislapshus means that the two become tucked into each other. They don't live in separate planets. It's not like the godly soul lives in one part of your body, the animal soul lives in another part of the body, and they meet for a conference once a year. No, the nefesh alikis is mislabeshes in the nefesh habahamis. Mislabeshes literally means like you have a lavush. You get dressed in something, and that thing encompasses you. And when you look at yourself, what do you see? You only see your lavush. I don't see what's inside your lavush. All I see is your garment. In fact, sometimes you can mistake and think there's nothing outside of the garment. There's nothing there's nothing inside of the garment.
An empty suit.
Huh? An empty suit, yeah. Yeah. A wax museum, yeah. It's all dressed beautifully, but there's nothing inside. So the Nefesh HaLekis is dressed, it's malubish in the Nefesh HaBahamas. It's tucked into it. But remember, here we're not dealing with two physical entities where I'm dressed into something else. When you say here dressed and clothed, it means it's experienced through the animal soul and in the animal soul. Why? Because in order to think about life or to do anything with life, you have to use your mind, you have to think. You have to feel, you have to experience. Our biological life is our animal soul. So there's no experience of the divine soul without the vehicle, without the venue of the animal soul. This means that the divine soul is forced not only to live with the animal soul, but to be completely connected and integrated with it. So this is a marriage that's it's the most complicated marriage in the world. You think you have a complicated marriage? It pales in comparison to the marriage of the two souls. Because remember, when it comes to a literal marriage, you could run away 5:30 in the morning and then come back 7 o'clock at night. When it comes to the animal soul and the godly soul, there's no running.
Wherever you go, you take them with you.
You take them both with you. They're together. They're together for life. So I can't cut out one and say you're not part of my life. Because if you're not part of my life, then I can't have the other one. They work together. They have to work together. That's why he says the purpose is that the Nefesh HaLekis needs to go into the world of the Nefesh HaBahamas, understand its language, talk to it, and communicate to it. So he says, Nefesh HaLekis HaMislabeshes bo. It comes enclosed in it. Umizbainenes b'Hashem echad b'kriyas Shema Shema Yisrael. And that the Nefesh HaLekis goes through a state of Izbainenus, which means mindfulness. In Hashem Echad, in the oneness of God, especially during Kriya Shema, when it says Shema Yisrael, Vayidei Zev Ahavta B'chol Levavcha B'shnei Yitzarech. The Mishnah says in Brachas, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha B'chol Levavcha, with two bases, with all your heart, means with both Yitzarecha. What's Prat B'shnei Yitzarecha? He says that the Nefesh, this is the work with the animal soul. B'shnei Yitzarecha means I can't work only with my godly soul, I have to work with my animal soul. How do I do that? Because Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad represents the mindful consciousness of the divine soul, but it's enclosed in the animal soul. In other words, it explains the concepts of the animal soul. When it explains the concepts of the animal soul, now you can have the next step. If you don't have the first step, that the Nefesh HaLekis is talking, is negotiating, is explaining things to the animal soul, you can't get to the step of Ahavtas Hashem Elokecha B'chol Levavcha.
So even though you distinguish between Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov, here it sounds like he's using Shnei Yitzarecha in the sense of Nefesh Behemoth.
Yes, perfect. Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara are associated with Nefesh HaLekis and Nefesh HaBahamas, but not limited to them. Again, they're associated with them, but they're aspects of them. One of the aspects of the Nefesh HaLekis is called Yetzer Tov. One of the aspects of the Nefesh HaBahamas is called Yetzer Hara. So Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara are very authentic descriptions, but they tell you a part of the picture. The Nefesh HaLekis is like a... It's a soul that encompasses a lot of dimensions. Yetzer Tov is one of the branches of the bank, one of its franchises.
So really, they're separate. Both souls have both. Yeah. No, like there would be a Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara within each Nefesh Bahamas.
No. Why do we have to go there?
I'm just saying that if each one is a completely separate thing, then they would each contain aspects of everything. You
want to know how they could communicate? That's a good question, we'll see. You want to know how they could communicate if they're such strangers? That's a good question. But they could communicate.
I'm saying that each one is a separate thing. Like they're completely separate, but they're completely connected. So
yes.
Within each one is aspects of everything.
Generally, b'chlal in life, yeah. Everything is. Yeah. We're all connected. New York telephone, right?
So there would be no Yetzer Hara within the Nefesh.
I wouldn't be so dramatic. No, we don't have to be so dramatic about everything.
So what you said about last week, that the person doesn't refer to his own name, though, over here, that's not true. Because one talks to the other, Nucham, how you doing? Nucham, how you doing?
Okay. When you get down to that, yeah. The Nefesh HaBahamas of Nucham, how you doing? Yeah. Or the Nefesh HaLekis, how you doing? Depends who does the main speaking by you. That depends.
Mrs. Fried.
Huh? So we began discussing that every person has two souls, and we operate on two levels of consciousness. One is the animal consciousness, the nefesh habahamis, and one is the divine or transcendental consciousness, the nefesh halikis. As a result of this, we don't have one personality, so to speak. We have minimum two personalities. Some of us have more than two personalities, but minimum two personalities. What do we mean, two personalities? Two sources of life, two batteries, two very different visions of life. And they make us tick in different ways. In other words, when you're having thoughts, you can identify and ask a question. Are these thoughts coming from your nefesh habahamis or coming from your nefesh halikis? When you're behaving in a certain way, you could look in the mirror and say, is this a behavior of the nefesh habahamis or is this a behavior of the nefesh halikis? You're having a particular attitude or a particular emotion, whether it's an emotion of fear or an emotion of hate or an emotion of jealousy. And once you learn this process and you learn about these two souls, you could begin to identify and say, this is my nefesh habahamis now on display in its full grandeur, in its full ferocious animal and beastly power, fully on display.
Even you identify it's still yours. What do you do after that? Meaning you're still doing it. It's still your soul.
Yeah, but all processes of change begin with identification. If I don't identify, then I live in a confusion. Haksil b'choshech haylech. The first process is to identify. Even depression, yeah.
Yeah, but once you know it comes from the nefesh habahamis, it's still.
The very identification that it comes from the nefesh habahamis, number one, it tells you that it's not all of you. It's not the complete description of who you are. Number one. In other words, there's a deeper self that I still have to get to. That's a very empowering idea. So even though I have this terrible anxiety or terrible depression or terrible envy, right, or hate or anger or shame or whatever it may be, these attitudes or these emotions or this craving, a crazy taiva for something, I could say, yeah, this is my nefesh habahamis on display. It's not all of me. This is not the 100% totality of who I am. That's number one. Number two, even deeper and equally important, is I don't have to judge it. That may be equally significant. Number one, it's not all of me. Number two, I could also let it be. I don't have to judge it. I'm afraid that if this is all of me, so this is who I am, really, that's it? So then paradoxically, I become more obsessed with it. When I say, yes, this is a human being has an animal consciousness, and you know what? Animals get very scared. Animals get very, very scared, you know? You don't give your dog what it wants. It gets very, very anxious. And the dog has a very small, narrow vision of what it wants. It's very clear. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's what's happening right now.
Your dog in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you remember? Yeah. You know, it has a very. This is what I need right now, and if not, life is over. So the ability for me to be able to say, this is my nefesh habahamis, I don't have to judge it. Meaning, I don't have to. What do I mean? I have to judge. Not have to judge doesn't mean I have to do everything it says. No. But it means, okay, this is that voice in me, and it's part of what it is to be a human being.
Also, once you identify it, you can decide to act according to the nefesh.
That's number 3. That's point 3. Point 3 is, once you identify, now you can ask a question. Which self do you want should sit at the steering wheel? Which self do you want should rule your life, should dominate, should make the decisions? That's what you mean. You can make that distinction.
But even before you get there, just knowing that you have, that's tremendously comforting and empowering. Knowing that it doesn't define you is a tremendous chizuk in and of itself.
Point 1, yeah. That doesn't define you exclusively. Yeah.
Can you say that the nefesh halikis is also not who I am only?
The nefesh elikis is, I would say, is a core being. The nefesh habahamis, but you're right. There's also a nefesh habahamis. They're both very true. Did I understand your question?
Yeah, yeah. I
They're
guess
both true.
Is the nefesh elikis me and the nefesh habahamis kind of
Visiting?
I mean, is it somewhat of a distortion? Is it?
All you have to work
It's an ingredient to make you live.
The word distortion I would not use here.
It's real.
It's real. The word in the true reality of Einoid Mulvada, it's a distortion. But to use that word undermines what we're talking about, because now I'm telling myself, okay, I'm a distorted person. You're not a distorted person. This is like part of the plan of existence. So yes, the sense is we're all distorted. The world is distorted. Yeah.
It's a core
Just
that
like you
makes
said.
you up to be a human being. If not your
Exactly.
Don't
That's
give
what
them
makes us who we are.
Don't give them this
core in
theory.
that sense too.
That's what's going
You
to
said that
hold it.
Nefesh Elokis was a.
The nefesh elikis is the pnimius of the person. It's a core.
Is Nefesh Bahamis core too in that, in the sense that it's essential?
Yeah. It's
So but are they both operating systems? Is that where?
yeah. Two operating systems. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you work through Atzmus, then the Nefesh Bahamas is going to be booted, no? It's going to go
Not bottle, transformed.
transformed.
Yeah.
So it's going
If you can tune into that place. Yeah.
it's the ultimate goal.
You're right.
Tune into what?
But if you skip, if you jump ahead of yourself, you end up with nothing.
No, but the answer is
V'lo yisayla b'malas al mizbechi. You're right, in the ultimate sense.
Heard about it, never met him.
In the ultimate sense, there becomes complete synchronization.
and this takes over.
But if you don't recognize the conflict, you can't get to that place. You understand why?
You can get there, but you fall back.
You first have to give respect to everyone's voice and understand what they're saying. No, I don't mean respect. Respect doesn't mean I worship it or I even follow it. Respect means I know it for what it is. I don't repress it, deny it, make believe I'm a saint and I have to be a saint and so forth.
This is not real Atzmus. If you deny it, they just think you're Atzmus.
That's also true. That's also true.
Can you give an example of nefesh habahamis? I mean, a drive.
Anybody wants to give an example of their nefesh habahamis? We're looking for examples.
Anybody got a word?
The desire, the need to procreate, to eat, to be sheltered and safe, the things that you've spoken about.
That's actually benign, yeah.
So it could be something that
I would like to go to sleep.
Positive, constructive. Yeah.
We're done with the cheesecake.
You know, the
We're
idea
off to
that
sushi
You want to
now.
mushal here in Nefesh Bahamas? Tonight is the Beast Barbecue opens tonight. It's tonight is the opening of the Beast Barbecue. This is Nefesh Bahamas.
For some, that's the Nefesh Bahamis.
You want to know if Lighting Hanukkah counts as the Nefesh Bahamas?
Yes, the excitement that people have is really
That's a good question. That's a good question.
We're going to go to Shomer, Nefesh
in the Nefesh Elokis, there's also the same
anxiety from barbecue.
The Nefesh Elokis, there's also the same mitzvahs. Right.
You mean that he's the chazan? He doesn't like being the chazan.
He has to be a shukid.
Isaac, what's his advice?
You dafka want him not to show up to Shulfa Baruch and then everybody will be happy?
Then he'll be happy.
So when Rivka becomes pregnant, it says in Parshas told us, she has a very tumultuous pregnancy. Vayisroitzitzu habonim bekirba. Rashi says it's not just that the pregnancy was difficult; it's that she felt something so strange. Yaakov was gravitating to the yeshivas of Shem and Aver, and Esav was gravitating to pagan ashrams. In yeshiva they told us to kirches, to churches. So I once asked, I said, I think Christianity happened after Esav. Right, but that was not a good question. So the word is not kirches, the word is pagan ashrams, or whatever they had over there in Mesopotamia, in northern Iraq. I don't know exactly what they worship. Pagan centers, huh? Temples, very good. So Rivka is very, very perturbed, and her response consists of 3 words, and it seems a little dramatic. Lama za anoichi, why am I? It's a difficult pregnancy, and that translates into the question of why am I? So she goes to seek Hashem. The response is Shnei goyim bevitnech, Shnei lu'umim me'ayich yiparedu, lo'im eloim yemat v'rav yavet tzayir. There are two nations in your womb, and two civilizations will depart from your innards. And when one gains strength, the other one will weaken. And when one gains strength, the other one will weaken. In other words, one will become strong from defeating the other one. As the Gemara says. And Rivka is content. Rivka is content. What made her content? What was bothering her? And what made her content? If the pregnancy was difficult, so he tells her, okay, you have two nations in your womb. Okay. So now she wasn't nauseous anymore. She was probably still nauseous. So she understood why. There's two nations. But even if the two are gravitating, Chazal said they're gravitating to different places. So there's two nations in you. So why is Rivka still not upset? There's still a fetus gravitating to another place. On a spiritual level, it says in Tanya that this pasuk L'oim Elohim Yematz represents the two souls. You see, we all feel what Rivka felt. Okay, she felt it maybe in a more dramatic way, but everyone has v'yisroel tzitzu abana b'kirba. That's the duality we talk about. People can one day be extremely selfless, noble, idealistic, and the same person a day later is one of the most selfish, obnoxious beasts you will ever encounter. You look at yourself, your relationships with people, your relationships with God, your relationships with your children, your relationships with your spouse, your relationships in business, your relationships internally vis-a-vis yourself. And you ask a question, Lama za'anoichi, why am I? The question makes a lot of sense. It's more than who am I, it's why am I? More than who am I, why am I? Vayomer la Hashem, and the response is, the first thing is, relax. Shnei goyim bevitnech. Shnei goyim bevitnech. You're asking, why am I? Basically, there's no I. There's not even an I. I don't even know who I am. I don't even know who I am. There's nothing that's real in me. One day it's this, one day it's this. The answer is no. Shnei goyim bevitnech. There's two nations inside of you. Two civilizations, two souls, two consciousnesses, two operating systems, with two different visions. And each one has its turn. Sometimes one never has its turn. It's just relegated to the subconscious cellars of your psyche. But very often they fluctuate. Sometimes one reigns supreme for a month or for a year or for 10 years, and the other one is sitting in the basement and crying for attention. And when a soul is crying for attention because it's hungry, it becomes grouchy. And a lot of the emptiness and the void that people feel in their life is because one of their souls is completely repressed, is completely dormant. And when people feel that part of themselves, it's very, very difficult to deal with if you're not feeding it. And then when the godly soul emerges, there's a whole different identity. So the Shnei Goyim Bebitnech tells us, don't delegitimize your moments of nobility and idealism just because there are moments of grotesque, immoral promiscuity. Both are very genuine expressions of the human psyche, and one does not cancel out the other. One does not say that the other one is complete false and vanity. On the contrary, each one has its melucha. And what it means is that there is an inherent struggle. There is an inherent struggle between these two souls. So the struggle is inherent to the human dichotomy, and both of them are very real and true.
But in the story of Yaakov and Esau, weren't they more of two opposing viewpoints? But in the case of, in our case of the nefashos, they're more of assistant devices.
Well, they could be. Yaakov and Esau had the potential of being perfectly symmetrical brothers with different roles. Vayigdalu hana'arim.
Is that what comforted Rivka?
Look, what comforted Rivka is the notion that each one has its legitimate space, and one doesn't cancel out the other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In reality, what happened is the two brothers grew apart, very apart, which often happens in our lives as well. The two brothers grow apart. So he says here that the purpose why the neshama came into this world was levarer nefesh habahamas, to literally work with the nefesh habahamas, to train it, to refine it, to educate it, to work with it. So this brings us to a fourth step now. Okay, you're with us? He asked, what do you gain by this knowledge? Number one, to be able to identify and to know that it's not all of you. That's a tremendous idea. Number two, I don't have to judge. I understand where it comes from, right? And I appreciate it. Number three, I can make a choice. Number four, and this is extremely valuable, is I come to realize that this is part of my purpose. Part of my purpose is to deal. I am married to this second soul. My two souls got married to each other because they're here to help each other. So you're like so upset about this voice. Instead of getting upset, why don't you just get to work? Instead of cultivate the opportunity that exists here. Cultivate the opportunity. And this is really the beginning of real transformation happens. You know how often couples, they get upset about the same things for 30, 40 years, and it's just like a knee-jerk reaction. Here she goes again. Here he goes again. They don't even have to say it. It's like that familiar face, you know. Oh, here she goes again. It's like, you know, and everyone puts on the gear and they get into the mode of either offensive, defensive, isolation, aggression. Go to sleep, run away from the house, it's time for mincha, whatever the mode is. I have to go to the Mashiach, whatever the mode is, but it's like, you know, round up the usual suspects. Here we go again. It's that, going into that space, which essentially is a very profound form of victimhood. We are essential victims to that process, and we're just we're familiar with the victimhood process. It's interesting. All the people here who are married are smiling. The people that are bachrim don't know what I'm talking about. So may it remain that way.
Reagan also said that about Jimmy Carter in the election. There he goes again. That was like the defining moment.
There he goes again, right?
It's a societal issue. That's exactly what's happening today in society with the whole concept of the victimhood and it's a big societal issue.
Yeah, right. So we just go into that place. But there's really, what if you could look at it differently? What if you could tell yourself, that part of my purpose in life is to be able to work this through, to be able actually to look at it, not run away, understand where it's coming from, see where the distortion happens in it and in me, and my response to it, and grow from this experience.
What is the reason?
What is the reason that this is the purpose? Well, in the case of the example I gave, because you happen to be married to this person for 50 years, it may be a good idea.
Understand what? That
so you don't have to put on you don't have to put on your army uniforms every time when it happens again.
Understand that.
And fight or flight.
What is the reason for?
And in this case, it's because you can't even get divorced if you want to.
To achieve greatness.
Nefesh halikis and nefesh habahamis. It's not just to achieve greatness. This is the tachlis yiridus haneshama lo'olam hazeh. This is the tachlis of yiridus haneshama. To be able to identify the language of the animal soul and to work with it, to refine it, to be mevarer it.
To understand that you don't understand you.
That's fine. To understand that I don't understand is the beginning. To understand that I don't understand is the beginning. So now let's continue. The key conversations between the two, the Abalatanya always believed was hisbonenus. Hisbonenus meant mindful contemplation, mindful awareness, to the point where you can explain things to the animal soul. And he always felt that davening is a primary time for that conversation between the godly soul and the animal soul. Really, davening is a conversation. The reason davening is verbal is not just so it shouldn't be that boring for people, so they say the words loud. The reason davening is verbal is because you're really having a conversation. You're having a conversation with God, and you're also having a conversation with your animal soul. You're having a conversation with yourself, which of course are always the most interesting conversations. And the conversations has different peaks. We'll see different parts of the conversation.
Is Nefesh Bahamas all things physical?
Also.
Oh, it's not only?
No.
What else is it?
Nefesh Bahamas could have spiritual moments also. Art and music, sometimes deep.
Oh, but it's still a physical.
Well, you mean it's the soul responsible for physical life? Yeah, that's what you mean. It's the soul responsible for physical life, no question.
For depression and for chaos and all emotional things.
That's what I'm saying. It's not just about physical stuff.
Right. I don't mean tangible.
It's a soul with all the faculties of a soul: intellectual capacity, emotional capacity, functional capacity, attitudes, perspectives, emotions, dispositions, cravings, like a real animal. And we today a little more, we never really pay tribute to the personality of animals. I don't know if the word personality could be applied to animals, but certainly to the Nefesh Bahamas. Animals have a life. They have a real life. Modern research has shown how much of a life animals have. Animals were always seen as, animals. You're an animal. You're a chay, you're a behemoth. Really, that's a very deep to say something to somebody. You're a behemoth, although in class it was always, when were you told you were a behemoth? It meant you're hopeless. But the truth is, it's a very deep description. Sometimes it's a compliment, If you should tell the person, if only you would be a behemoth, you would be so much better off, You would know what you're doing. You would actually be healthy. You would be self-aware.
It's your tohu roots.
Yeah.
It's your tohu roots.
As du was noch gewesen a behemoth, wird noch gewesen Gott. The problem is you're not a behemoth, you're not a mensch. You stam in limbo. So a behemoth has a shtel. It has a shtel, but it's a behemoth.
There are all kinds of different animals.
Of course.
Everybody's a raging
I know. Yes, there's a tiger and there's a puppy. He has in his house rabbits and snakes, and the kids love them. There's different types of animals. There's bnei tarbus. There's also a shar tam and a shar hamuad, right? There's cats and there's dogs. And there's people who have tigers as their pets too. Or gorillas. But once in a while, the gorillas, become gorillas. So that you have to be careful.
So like you said, there's a zoo inside each animal.
There's a zoo inside each of us, yes. Yes, and if you could be a good zookeeper, you're good. And sometimes you have to enjoy. You have to enjoy the spectacle. People come to the zoos, they pay a lot of money just to watch the gorillas run around and the monkeys climb trees and jump from one tree to another tree, and something very special about that. Imagine you come into a zoo and you start judging the animals. Why are you jumping? Why are you doing? Why are you doing? Right? Cut them slack. They're supposed to be animals. Again, it doesn't mean you have to go into the cage and start doing the same thing. But it means that your Nefesh Bahamas is supposed to be a behemoth. That's fine. But he's not the zookeeper. He doesn't have the steering wheel. He sits and he does this. So you learn almost to enjoy this show. What do I mean to enjoy the show? To understand this is the process. We have a zoo inside of us. And as we're going to see, we don't have one type of animal. We have many different types of Nefesh Bahamas. In other words, it's a very large zoo. It's like the Bronx Zoo. It's like the Bronx Zoo. Huh? So just because you're not an animal doesn't mean you have to judge animals. Right? On the other hand, it doesn't mean you worship them. And doesn't mean any instinct of an animal becomes Kodesh Kadoshim. That's the process. You do train animals. You train animals. And the Nefesh Bahamas, of course, is not an animal in the zoo. It's the animal of the human being. Yes, no, the animals are trained and animals can reach very great heights. In the case of the human Nefesh Bahamas, it can reach much greater heights than the animal in the zoo because it's ultimately not an animal. We're calling it, I'm just giving that as an example of part of how you deal with it.
Joining it by fighting.
You join it by fighting it, but the fighting has an objective. It's not just about fighting it. You're not fighting it to fight it. It's like you discipline your children to fight with your kids. Is that the process? Are you supposed to fight with your kids? You never fight with your kids. If you fight with your kids, you're the kid. You don't fight with your kids. You don't fight with your kids. Oh, forget about that. You discipline. You discipline with compassion, with empathy, with love. You also have conversations. And for the discipline to be effective, you need conversations. But there's times you have to look at your child and say, no. But the answer is no. No. They call it the N vitamin, right? The N vitamin. The no vitamin, which is lacking today in the United States of America. Do you distribute that vitamin?
Sure.
The N vitamin. Okay. So v'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, as the Mishnah says in Brachos, is because there was a conversation with the Nefesh HaBahamas. Let's go inside. The line starts Yisrael chuli aydeza v'hafta b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha chuli. Ach koidem kriya shma tiknu chachamim shtayim lefanel lekiyam kriya shma. Before kriya shma, the chachamim were masakin 2 brachas before, in order for kriya shma to be miskayim. What do we mean to be miskayim? To be able to endure, to be able to have a real meaning in a person's life. And here he's really addressing a big question, which is a question of the Rashba in halacha. Very interesting question. He says it as a derech agav, but he's really addressing the Rashba's question. The Rashba asks a question. The Chazal, Anshe Knesses Agdoila, instituted Birchas HaMitzvahs. Before you do a mitzvah, you make a bracha. I don't just start checking chametz. I say I'll beer chametz, and then I check my chametz. I don't just eat matzah. I say al achilas matzah. I don't just blow shofar. I say l'shmoyaka. I don't read the Megillah. I say al mikra Megillah. I'm not going to put on tefillin soon. I'm first going to say that's not a biblical obligation. It's a rabbinic obligation. Biblically, there's no brachas before mitzvahs, as you know, besides birchas haTorah. However, there's something unique. Before tefillin, the bracha is about tefillin. Asher kedushanim mitzvayis v'tzivanu l'nicht, and it's essentially a meditation to help me go into the mode of putting on tefillin. Before I eat matzah, al achilas matzah, and before I read the Megillah, I light Chanukah candles lahadlik ner shal Chanukah. Before Kriya Shema, they also made brachas. What should the bracha be? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kedushanim mitzvayis v'tzivanu likrei es Shema, or al Kriya Shema, or likrei es Shema. There's no shliach. So mitzvah shebeguf, there's a question where you do lamed or al, right? Lo haniach tefillin or al anachas tefillin, al mitzvahs tefillin. Lechol matzah, al achilas matzah. Okay, that's a question in Rishonim why sometimes this way or that way. So say, Asher Shalom Tzivanu, to read Kriya Shema. No, what's the bracha before Kriya Shema? There's 2 brachas before Shema. Starts off Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzei Vayikra Choshen Choshen Shalom, a ganze Maisa with Meir La'aretz, and then a whole story about Malachim. A whole story about Malachim. Kadosh Kadosh Efanim Chaysa Kodesh Mekablim El Malchus Shamayim Lahakdish LeYotzram Baruch Kvod Hashem Koima, right? Le'kel Baruch Nemes Yiteinu Yotzei Amoyres. Then a second bracha that God loves us, Avas Olam V'Sein B'Lebeinu Bina, and suddenly Shema Yisrael. Now, you could say Chazal wanted you should talk about these things, no problem. Why are you calling it Birchas Krishma? You want to talk about it, talk about it. Why is it called a bracha before Shema? 2 brachas before Shema and then 1 bracha after Shema. The same is true at night. There's 2 brachas before Shema and 2 brachas after Shema. In the morning it's 1 after, and at night it's 2 after. What's the vart? This means every bracha is there to assist you to do the mitzvah. When you understand the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, you'll understand why they had to do this bracha. And the bracha is not to do Kriya Shema. The bracha is to talk about things that will allow you to say Shema. What's Shema? Shema is the mindful meditation where you're talking to your animal soul and explaining to it Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, so that it could be V'haftas Hashem Elokecha B'chol Levavcha, that both of them can join Avos Hashem. How can you even have a conversation with your animal soul about God? So he says, for this, you have to have the brachas before Kriya Shema, because without it, there's no Kriya Shema. What's the vart? So here he says something very, very powerful. Ki efshel hachniya v'lichboshes ruach nefesh abahamas tachas b'mshalas hanefesh elikis. Ki ma'idei shorsha shel hanefesh abahamas. There's no way of subduing or conquering the spirit of the animal soul under the rulership of the divine soul only by identifying the root, the shoirish, the source of the animal soul. Shemakar chaitzva, the source from which it's honed, hewn, carved out, chiseled out, is mechayis hakodesh b'merkava, is from the holy animals in the merkava of Yecheskel, pnei Aryeh, the face of the lion, pnei Shor, the face of the ox, chuli, there's another 2, pnei Nesher, the face of the eagle, and pnei Adam, which is not so relevant here.
Mishmarim is only the ultimate ishtalshul.
Right, we're talking the shoirish. Remember the shoirish. The shayrish is pnei shor. Ki ein hadinin nimtakin ela b'sharsham. This looks like a benign sentence, doesn't it? Because no dinim, no judgments, no negative energy can become sweetened only if you trace it back to the source. Ein hadinim nimtakim ela b'sharsham. Took 150 years for society to catch on this one. Anything that looks harsh and negative, before you give a final judgment, take it, go back all the way to the shorish, look where it began, and it'll become like cotton candy. It will become not nullified, sweetened. The source of anxiety and anxiousness, if you go back all the way to the shorish, it'll become nimtuk. This is really the process of, today you may call it different forms of psychoanalysis, but sometimes you're having a very deep negative reaction to a particular person, and it drives you mad, and it's the source of so much conflict and contention in your spirit. And if you can have the courage to take that emotion and go back to the moment it was born, what do you think it's going to look like? What do you think it's going to look like? What is that emotion which now is full of hate, aggression, pain, or not so much pain anymore, anguish, anger? I want to kill you. I wish you died, 20 years ago. Whatever it is, whatever these primal emotions are. And you judge yourself as a bad person for having them. But if you could go back all the way to the shorish, what do you think it's going to look like? When that emotion was born, what do you think it's going to look like?
Positive desire.
Huh?
Positive desire.
A positive desire, or?
Two kids playing in a sandbox.
Two kids playing in a sandbox. Or a very deep longing for something that the soul deserves. Right? Safety, love, wholesomeness, security, to know that I matter. How bad is that? How bad is that you want to know that you matter? Is that such an evil thought? That's a wonderful thought. It's a true thought. You know that you matter. But now I can't recognize that anymore. I don't say, oh, I hate you, you know why? Or you make me so angry because deep down I want to know that I matter. No, it doesn't look like that anymore. Now it just looks like you are the worst of the worst. You are the enemy of enemies. You are the source of my misery and agony. But if you go back to the shorish, all dinim become nimtuk. All dinim become nimtuk. Now you have, anybody wants to give, Dr. Lamb, maybe you give us an example for this? Don't you do this all day?
If you look at the behavior of your husband, and he's acting like a jerk, so you could wonder, you could look at, what you'll say to a wife is, imagine if when he was 10 years old, he didn't behave this way. What would have happened to him? You realize
So when she sees her husband behaving obnoxiously, you tell her when he was 10 years old, he needed to behave this way to live, to survive.
To feel love, to survive. It was just
right. So it's really a very sweet kid just trying to live. No? Can we blame somebody for that?
Especially when he went fast, he'd be a kid again.
Huh?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can blame somebody for that. Because all of us...
That's why you're the cardiologist and he's the therapist.
Because that means that he eats all the... No, because of course we blame, because that's his tough kid. I mean, because he let himself be defined by that as an adult.
Okay, good. Now, do you want to tell us why he's responding this way to the beautiful thing you said?
I'm very sympathetic to what he said.
Right.
But to say
now the work begins. Right. You're right.
To say he's blameless
You're right.
is giving into victimhood.
Yes.
All over
Good.
again.
Well,
Michelle, you're saying he's a tough kid or tough kid?
No.
He's not 10 years old anymore.
He's saying now you have to take responsibility. That's true. But how do you take responsibility? You don't take responsibility. One way of taking responsibility is, that would be called a skafia, is like, despite all these emotions, I will crush them and I will behave differently, but I don't deal with it. A deeper way of taking responsibility, and there are different stages for different reactions, is to go into it and take it back to its source, and then you'll see that it's really a whole different experience. And then what happens is, you can search for that initial experience through different ways, and you don't need this outlet anymore. The very outlet then becomes converted into a tremendous source of closeness and love. So, Einan dinim nimtaken ela b'sharsh. You want to now talk to your animal soul. The animal soul is a real animal. It has that language. And you tell the soul, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and it's like, what? Are you meshuga? So he says, you can't go into that conversation. You first have to talk about the Zayda of the Nefesh HaBahamis. You have to talk about its great-great-great-grandfather. Who is its great-great-great-grandfather? V'hoifanim v'chayes ha'kodesh b'rash godel misnasim l'masasrafim. Yishtabach shim chalad malkeinu yoytzim misharsim. Kulam poischim espeyim b'kedusha v'torah b'shira v'zimra. All that, he says, that description of the Chayes HaKodesh is really, why are they called Chayes HaKodesh, holy animals? Why are you calling them animals? I said, when you call somebody an animal, sometimes it's a compliment. Chayes HaKodesh, they're holy Chayes, they're holy behemoths. Pnei Shor, Pnei Aryeh. Because essentially the Chaya down here has a common denominator with the Chaya up there. Both have tremendous passion. Both have tremendous fire. It's just the fire of the animal soul down here got lost in translation. The message got distorted, but the qualities are still very identical. They're reflective. So therefore, I have to talk to the Nefesh HaBahamis about who it really is, rather than try to impose upon it my identity. That's the big difference between telling a person who they really are or telling a person who I want you to be. Telling you who I want you to be ultimately remains alien to you. Telling you who you really are. Let me tell you about the blood you have flowing in your sinews. Let me tell you, you're the Lion King. You're a Lion King. You're not a behemoth like you call yourself. You're calling yourself a behemoth. So you're really telling the Nefesh HaBahamis, let me tell you about your origin, your source, your shayrish. Without that, there can't be Krishma. If I don't have that conversation with my animal soul, in other words, I have to be able to identify it and take it back all the way to its shayrish and discover that all of its passions really are deep, deep down cravings for a deep, wholesome relationship, just like the Chayes HaKodesh have when they're yearning. B'kedusha, b'mevarchim, b'shabchim, b'farim, b'maritzim, b'kablam aleim, ol malchus shamayim, l'hachtish liyotzim, b'nachas ruach, b'safa v'rura, and they say, oimrim b'yira kadosh, 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 and then you have Chayes HaKodesh, b'rash, gadol, misnasim, borach, ved Hashem, kaiman, l'kel, borach, nimis yiteinu. This is, you're talking to the animal soul here. You're telling it its own story, even though it doesn't look like it now. The story of the animal soul in my system is a very different story. It's a story of what would seem like very narrow vision, self-centeredness, egocentricity, just focusing on, comfort at the moment, and that's it. But if you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, and you take it back to the shayrish, it's a whole different experience. So good luck with the conversation today.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.